Americans don't want cute cars, but we need them. The popularity of the SUV has continuously climbed over the last 40 years, to the point that American auto manufacturers have almost completely stopped making regular cars for their own home turf. In 2021, SUVs made up 80% of new car sales, and it doesn't seem like that's going to change, with lots of brands discontinuing their car models entirely, but this didn't used to be the case. The oil crisis in the 1970s meant gas prices were surging. As a result, the big American V8s we were used to were now a financial burden, and imports began to dominate the market. These were not only cheaper to fuel up, but also cheaper to maintain, and gained a reputation for being more reliable. So you get a longer lasting car for significantly less money, and it might even feel a little sporty, too. These small, fun, efficient cars pushed American manufacturers to make their own versions, or at least pretend to. Thanks to the combination of widespread adoption of these small, cute cars and new regulations in place to keep cars efficient going forward, things were looking up. By 1983, the average fuel economy had risen from 14 to 22 miles per gallon, and US oil imports had almost halved since 1977. Suddenly, supply outweighed demand, which lowered gas prices significantly, and naturally, we felt the need to go big once again. In 1984, the Jeep Cherokee was born, and it is often regarded as the first modern SUV. Though SUV-type vehicles existed before then, like the Suburban, it was the Cherokee who put the sport in sport utility vehicle. It was made to be smaller, lighter, and more efficient with better handling than the big, bulky utility vehicles of the past. It was the perfect middle ground between a car and a truck, and people noticed. It seemed like the ideal car. Spacious, family-friendly, and tough enough to handle a little off-roading. It made drivers feel as though they could conquer anything, anywhere, anytime. Almost 3 million were sold in its lifespan. The Cherokee truly paved the way for the SUV boom of the next decade. By the 90s, SUVs were everywhere. You could now buy an SUV from any of your favorite brands, not just Jeep. And a lot of these are still quite popular today. But why did we decide we needed this type of vehicle? The SUV craze is very reminiscent of how we were before the oil crisis. Bigger is better. More is more. This is a country characterized by its abundance, and it's practically encouraged to flaunt your success with a big car and a big house. A small car that isn't a sports car could signal financial struggles, which would be so embarrassing. With an SUV, not only are you successful in terms of wealth, but in freedom as well. No longer are you confined to paved roads. The entire world is open for you to explore because your car can actually handle it. Now that might seem a little too intense, too rugged for the average person, but they are cooler than a minivan while still being safe enough for your entire family. Maybe even safer than a normal car since they're bigger. Or is that just what they want you to think? SUVs may be safer for its occupants, but they pose a real danger to everyone else. The increased height and weight of an SUV really pack a punch in collisions, so unless it's up against another SUV, this makes them significantly more fatal to others. This especially applies to pedestrians and cyclists, who you may not even see since the height is great for viewing further away, but worse for seeing what's right next to you. This ends up creating a never-ending cycle of cars getting bigger and bigger, to the extent that they had to reinvent a smaller size SUV by introducing the crossover, which are generally the same size as the early SUVs. The added height also puts them at a greater risk of rolling over than small cars, so a single car accident can actually be more dangerous. The feeling of being safer in these cars may actually make you more dangerous too. Typically, when people feel unsafe in a car, they drive more cautiously. And the inverse tends to be true too. When people feel safer, they may drive more recklessly. A lot of people say they need SUVs for the extra space, which I do believe is true for some people, but not the majority of SUV buyers. Crossovers have generally the same amount of interior space as their hatchback counterparts, both in cargo and passenger areas. Most SUVs only offer 5 seats, and there's a significant price difference when you get into models with a third row, but luckily most people don't actually need that. In fact, I would argue that most people don't need the additional space that an SUV has to offer, period. I think the feeling that you absolutely must have all this extra space is manufactured by advertising, because realistically, you may only absolutely need it a couple times a year, if that. I think SUV marketing has been very successful at convincing people that they are the ideal choice. It's easy to market them from many different angles. SUVs are a rugged off-roading machine, a luxury good, and the perfect family hauler. If you own one, you will become the person you want to be, whatever that is, because the possibilities are endless. The marketing must have worked incredibly well because SUVs are not affordable for most people, and yet they've still dominated. Even if you're buying a crossover, which are around the same initial price as a regular car, they tend to be less fuel efficient and maintenance usually costs more, so you're paying more over time. If you follow the general rule of thumb of spending no more than 15% of your yearly income on your car, based on a median income of around $40,000, this is what your budget starts to look like. And if you stretch that to 20% based on the same income, it looks like this. Now, if you compare that to what a new car, crossover, and full-size SUV cost, it's just not reasonable to get anything that's not a car. Now, there are cases where someone genuinely needs an SUV, but for most people, it's excessive. If none of that convinces you that maybe SUVs aren't worth it, then just think about the environment. New hybrid SUVs are still less efficient than hybrid cars. Manufacturers skirt efficiency regulations because any size SUV, even a crossover, is considered a light truck, and therefore doesn't have to adhere to the more strict regulations that cars have. A bigger vehicle also means more materials are needed to produce them, and more materials are left once the car is dead. Around 75% of a car is able to be recycled, leaving 25% to go to a landfill, so a bigger car means more unrecycled materials by weight. The environmental benefit of owning an economical car has never been enough to convince people to buy them, though. American culture values the individual over the collective so much, it seeps into every aspect of our lives, and we tend to judge those with priorities that don't align with this. This is evident in that early hybrid owners were distinctively not cool and were seen as overly politically correct.
You bought a Prius?
I bought 7 of them.
I got my whole crew driving them. They're real quiet. Good for sneaking up on motherfuckers.
People assume a Prius owner must think that they're better than everyone else, when in reality only Honda Insight owners actually are. The Prius sold really well, but still could never outdo the RAV4. Over time, brands started discontinuing their car models entirely, or at least stopped selling them in the United States. They were not replaced with new cars, just SUVs and crossovers, sometimes even named after cars, like the Eclipse Cross or Corolla Cross. The only American brands that even make regular cars, not counting sports cars, are Cadillac, Tesla, and Lucid, which are more luxury-based and not accessible to the average buyer. So this begs the question, will regular cars ever make a comeback? Probably not. Even if there is another oil crisis, this would only temporarily increase car demand, but certainly not enough to make them truly popular again. And with EVs becoming cheaper and more widespread, people will probably still tend to buy SUV EVs over cars. Since around 80% of new cars sold are SUVs, that number can really only grow as manufacturers continue to discontinue their regular cars. There's only a few brand new car models even coming out right now, and Kia makes 2 of them, but the others being luxury models. There have even been new cars announced with legacy names like the Nissan Maxima EV that have been canceled before production ever started due to lack of interest. Over time, since there's not enough new cars being made, the used market for them will also eventually dry up. It's hard to say if something could really change the tides. Like, unless there's a major cultural shift in how we view and relate to our vehicles, I don't see regular cars ever gaining widespread popularity again. So even though we need small, cute cars, Americans just don't want them anymore. And for those who do, the road ahead is mostly used and getting rarer every day.